Good evening, welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson here, today's top stories. A police officer admits to the rape and kidnap of a 33-year-old Sarah Everard, who went missing from South London in March. Health Secretary Matt Hancock hints that the date for lifting restrictions could be delayed. And a leading academic talks about his research into cancel culture and becoming the target of a cancel campaign himself. A Metropolitan police officer arrested over the murder of Sarah Everard pleads guilty today to kidnapping and rape of the 33-year-old woman. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us this report from the Old Bailey.
An officer has told the court here that he accepts responsibility for killing Sarah Everard. Metropolitan Police Officer PC Wayne Cousins pleading guilty to the kidnap and rape of Everard, who went missing in March this year. Cousins was not asked to enter a plea to her murder. He answered guilty, sir, when asked for his plea to the first two charges, admitting kidnap unlawfully and by force or fraud.
Everard went missing as she walked home from a friend's house in Clapham, South London on March 3rd. She was reported missing by her boyfriend the next day. Her body was found hidden in an area of woodland in Ashford, Kent, 6 days later. Cousins appearing at the Old Bailey on Tuesday by video link from Belmarsh Jail. Members of Everard's family sat in court to witness the defendant enter his pleas.
The court heard that Cousins admitted responsibility for the killing of Everard, but they are awaiting medical reports. A further hearing before Lord Justice Fulford is due to take place on July 9th. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Old Bailey, London.
The Health Secretary hints the 21st of June unlocking date could be delayed if needed. It follows concerns over a rise in cases of the Indian variant. NTD's Jane Werrell has more.
As restrictions on our lives start to ease, there's been a return to some sense of normality. We remember June the 21st as the day for all legal limits on social contact to end. But signs the date may be delayed from the government, with the Health Secretary saying delaying the unlocking date isn't out of the question. He's encouraging people to get both jabs. People here have mixed views on the extension of the rules.
We've been, in lockdown or during the pandemic for over a year now. What's a couple of weeks or a couple of months gonna do? I think everyone needs to hold the horses a bit. If it's going to help us in the long run, then what's it going to do if it's going to be an extra month? So I guess expect the unexpected.
It was really important to get the really vulnerable in society vaccinated. I think now most people would say that a large percentage of the population in that category have been vaccinated, and variants are going to be a thing that happens anyway going forward. So we kind of have to find a way of living with coronavirus now, and I feel like we're kind of there. So for me, it would be real last resort to extend it, and we'd have to see some real solid scientific reasoning for doing so.
I'd rather have this lockdown extended, these restrictions extended, rather than have a full other lockdown. I think that would be better.
Last week, the Prime Minister said the data showed we were on track, but he warned of the possibility of a delay.
I'm afraid we just have to wait a little bit longer to see what's happening post step 3 on May the 17th. We have to see exactly what's happening.
Reports say a 2-week delay to the easing is being considered. The government says we'll find out about its plans for June 21st, a week in advance on June 14th. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
MPs are debating what to do with statues a year after Black Lives Matter protests pulled down or defaced images of historical British figures.
Exactly 1 year after the 17th century merchant Edward Colston statue in Bristol was thrown into the river, MPs debate preserving heritage and statues in cities. Labour's Rupa Huq talks about the complex characters of history. She says statues might seem to belong to the past, but it's necessary to keep them.
And I would say don't remove these statues, but contextualise them. They're not for everyone, but do keep them because they are a part of history and, they need to be put in proper context.
Culture Minister Caroline Dynudge says History shapes who we are and what we value. The best approach is to retain and explain statues to give their full story to the public.
And memorials don't just have historical significance. They're not just pieces of stone or marble. They're also sometimes very deeply symbolic, culturally or emotionally, sometimes to those who have died, and hold a huge importance to those that visit them.
Last summer, during the Black Lives Matter protests in the UK, some statues were pulled down, removed or vandalised. Protesters defaced a statue of Winston Churchill in London's Parliament Square, taping a Black Lives Matter sign to it and spraying it with graffiti. A statue of Queen Victoria in Leeds was sprayed with graffiti including the words murderer and slave owner.
A survey published this week shows a quarter of young people think it's okay to ban speakers with offensive views. This phenomenon known as cancel culture is growing in the academic world. NTD Simon Veazey talks to a professor who has been researching cancel culture and is now under threat himself.
University, cathedral of free discussion, where good, bad, and sometimes even dangerous ideas are free to rub shoulders. Not anymore, according to some free speech watchdogs. They say people are being ousted over run-of-the-mill views, so-called cancel culture. A survey by King's College London published Monday suggests 1 in 4 young people support no platforming, banning speakers with potentially offensive views. Professor Eric Kaufman at Birkbeck College in London is a leading researcher into cancel culture. Now he is the subject of a campaign to cancel him.
I think they basically put out this thread of tweets saying that I'm some kind of a white supremacist and so on, which is, and some of their, which is kind of funny, obviously, because of my own background is half Jewish and part Chinese and Latino.
Kaufman says that some radical academics are involved in the campaign against him, but he doesn't blame the university itself. He explained the general dynamic of cancel culture.
What you have there is a kind of internal activism against speakers who would, in their view, make such people either offend them or make them feel unsafe. So that is the sort of typical justification for trying to suppress speech.
Is it typically a kind of mob thing where it comes together rather organically, or is it sometimes that there's a sort of specific agenda and people who are kind of behind it, if you like?
I think there is often an organizing nerve center, where it's a group of, let's say, students and allied faculty and allies on Twitter who will try and gin up a kind of mob.
So you used the phrase fellow travelers. Presumably that wasn't accidental. You're kind of referring back to this almost a neo-Marxist kind of idea, right?
Yeah, it is a sort of what I call left modernism, which is, I think, the contemporary hegemonic ideology in elite institutions, which is a fusion of essentially liberalism, which had always focused on acquiring rights for minority groups, religious, racial, sexual, and then fused with a sort of Marxist outlook, which is that of victimhood and oppression.
How much kind of courage does it take as an academic these days to simply speak what's in your mind?
I do think it does, take a certain amount of courage, simply because in academia it's almost impossible to get a job. And certainly once you've been the subject of one of these campaigns. And of course there's a psychological toll. I mean, I've had internal complaints that have been launched by the same network.
Survey data suggests a growing appetite among young people for no platforming speakers. And the notion of free speech is even seen by some as a Trojan horse for distasteful views. What does Kaufman make of this?
Well, my response would be, bad ideas should be exposed to the sunlight and to debate, and they will be defeated by good ideas.
Simon Veazey, NTD News.
Members of Scotland's biggest teaching union are demanding an investigation into Mandarin classes funded by the Chinese regime. It comes ahead of the union's annual conference on Thursday. NTD's Sharon Hsu brings us more.
Teachers in Scotland say Beijing-funded education in Scottish schools is inappropriate given the human rights record of the communist regime. Scotland reportedly has the world's highest concentration of Confucius programs. It includes Confucius classrooms and more than 40 schools and organizations. That is, in addition to the larger-scale Confucius Institutes operating at major universities. The regime designs a curriculum and provides teachers for the language classes. These programs are central to the communist regime's strategy to improve its image and spread its influence. A former Confucius teacher told me that teachers are vetted first to identify their political orientation. Then it follows weeks of intensive training to learn how to promote the Chinese Communist Party in a positive image of China. The teachers from a local association in Fife said they will call on the Educational Institute of Scotland to investigate at an annual conference this Thursday. If the motion is passed, the matter will be addressed by the EIS National Executive. Back to Stuart.
Major outages hit social media, government and news websites across the world this morning. It was due to a glitch at a US-based cloud computing provider.
Websites for several leading media companies, including the Financial Times, The Guardian and New York Times, were all down on Tuesday morning. Other high-traffic websites, including Reddit, Amazon, PayPal and Spotify, were also experiencing problems. The UK government's website was affected by the global internal outage. Fastly, one of the world's most widely used content delivery network providers, later said it had identified an issue and a fix had been applied. The failure also broke some sections of other services, such as the Twitter servers that host the social network's emojis.
Drug dealers in the UK are among criminals duped into using an encrypted messaging service run by the FBI. The major international sting involved a system called Anom that was secretly monitored by law enforcement. Millions of messages about money laundering and planned murders were accessed by authorities across Europe, the US, Australia and New Zealand. The UK National Crime Agency said it had carried out multiple operations as a result of the sting, codenamed Operation Trojan Shield. Law enforcement agency Europol said around 800 suspects have been arrested in 16 countries. And in other news, US President Joe Biden is heading to the UK this week and Europe next week. The NATO Secretary General met with Biden in Washington and said China and Russia will be among the issues at the upcoming NATO summit.
NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg discussed strengthening NATO with US President Joe Biden at a White House meeting on Monday. It's in preparation for the alliance's summit next week in Brussels. Russia will be one topic. Stoltenberg welcomes Biden's highly anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Dialogue with Russia is not a sign of weakness. We are strong, we are united, and then we can talk to Russia, and we need to talk to Russia, partly to strive for a better relationship, but even if we don't believe in a better relationship with Russia, we need to manage a difficult relationship with Russia.
Stoltenberg said China will also be among the issues discussed.
China will soon have the biggest economy in the world. They already have the second largest defense budget, the biggest navy. They are investing heavily in advanced military capabilities, and they don't share our values.
He says in a more unpredictable world with more global competition, we need a stronger NATO. The White House says Biden will meet with Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Thursday ahead of attending the G7 summit in Cornwall. Biden will then head to Belgium for the NATO and European summits. The trip will conclude in Geneva, where Biden will meet with Putin on the 16th of June.
Thousands of officers drafted in from across the country are preparing to support Devon and Cornwall police in their biggest event ever, the G7 summit. Nearly 40 protest groups have also made arrangements for the event.
Police officers from across the country have begun arriving in Cornwall ahead of the G7 summit. 5,000 officers will assist during the event, which runs from the 11th to the 13th of June.
No one's ever done this in COVID, so we need to make sure that everything we do is COVID secure. And so this has been specifically designed to allow us to get those big numbers through, but keep everybody safe.
This summit is the first in-person meeting for leaders from the Group of 7 nations in 2 years.
So this is the largest operation that Devon and Cornwall Police have ever undertaken. This is the largest event in 2021 within England. So a significant policing operation, but one that we've relished the challenge to plan, and we're in a good position to deliver that with our command rooms opening today.
Almost 40 protest groups have made contact with police ahead of the summit. The officer in charge of security says police will facilitate peaceful protest with recognised locations in suitable places.
Still to come, UN judges uphold the life sentence for former Bosnian Serb military leader Ratko Mladic for genocide during the Bosnian War. That and more when we return.